Alderwoman Tabarez, you continue to have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Hine, I want to talk about manpower. Will the department issue any changes to the general orders to ensure that there's not like a backlog or a log jam when we're declaring a curfew and how it's being enforced?
So as far as manpower goes, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Our districts are never left short, no matter what event's going on, because we give the commanders, he or she, the power to buy back, to pay overtime, to make sure that the calls for service are addressed, and the public safety is our number one priority, no matter what's going on downtown. I mean, as you know, you could imagine there's multiple events going on every weekend, every day that we have to address and send officers to. The unique situation that these gatherings, the ripple effect, I should say, is like Monday, for example. This came out at 2:15, 2:20-ish, I believe, for a 3 o'clock impromptu gathering. So at that point, we're pulling resources from our day TAC teams, this and that, and we're pulling resources to cover that so that our districts are not short. Our neighborhoods are always covered. As far as general orders, staffing and everything, no. I mean, staffing is done every day, from the deputy chief down to the commander, down to the watch operations, within to ensure that we have adequate coverage in our neighborhoods, never to be short.
The reason why I asked that question is because it's my understanding that detaining an individual is very cumbersome. It's a timely process. And it's a timely process because when an individual is detained, the police officer is essentially taking guardianship of the minor, and they're they have guardianship of the minor until a parent is contacted or a legal guardian is contacted, and they arrive and they take the juvenile. This process can take hours. And so this process, my concern with manpower is that this process takes these police officers off the beat, and they rank up significant overtime for each individual curfew offense. So my question is, how does this measure, can you talk about how this measure impacts manpower and the length of tours?
So if we are going to enact curfew or a mass arrest situation, notifications are made throughout the different bureaus within the department. So the detective division and everyone starts to relocate to the processing centers to ensure that we don't incur as much overtime as possible, and to ensure that we have officers on the street and they fill out a mass arrest card at the time. This ordinance, we're not dealing with this yet, but in a mass arrest situation, the Bureau of Detectives and every notifications are made where they're showing up. The officers will fill out the mass arrest card on scene, describing all the probable cause and actions taken, officers involved, handed over where they're transported to the certain areas that are identified where we like to process said individuals, limiting our overtime, and to ensure that the officers on the scene. Because I think the most important thing, that, and no matter what we're dealing with, the DNC or any large gathering, that it's our responsibility as superintendent down to ensure the safety of the men and women, their physical safety, while addressing these situations as they occur.
Alderman Vasquez.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a point of clarification on that, because my understanding was, when I was speaking to one of the sponsors, that part of the reason this is being drafted is to facilitate and make it less of a process. Am I hearing that the process is already in place as far as detaining whether or not this thing is moving?
So I was referring to mass arrest situations. I think being out there and seeing it as being an incident commander for multiple events, once if the curfew was enacted, you'll see pretty much compliance. We're hoping full compliance, because most kids are not involved in the activity will want to go home, will want to leave the area, want to make the area safe, will want to make themselves safe. So once we enact, if this ordinance was passed, the curfew, you would see said behavior probably begin to cease. Because right now, I think the greatest example I can give, at 10 o'clock at night, where the curfew is enacted right now, at 9:55, you don't see an individual out there. So if said curfew was enacted at 7 o'clock at night,
Sure.
8 o'clock, thus freeing up our officers to go back to their districts and their areas of patrol.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My question was just very specific. None of that process related to detaining and processing center, none of that changes. Those tools are already in place. That was all I had a question about.
We have, in case
Okay.
there's a mass arrest situation, those policies are already in place.
I got you. Thank you.
In my next question, I want to touch on public transit. I want to talk about the CTA. Was the CTA invited here today? No? Okay. Do we have information on how teens use public transit to reach downtown destinations? And what else stops are they coming from as they're making their way to downtown? Do we have that information from public transit, from the CTA, on how these teens are using public transit to go downtown for these mass gatherings, and what else stops are they coming from as they make their way downtown? Do we have any information from the CTA?
Yeah, I would just kind of be clear from a public safety standpoint, from a police standpoint, that we're not really monitoring how these individuals are coming down. We only monitor when they show up.
So are we coordinating with the CTA and the CPD's Mass Transit Union in terms of like monitoring the turnstile jumpers or reckless conduct on the CTA before large gatherings downtown?
I believe our CTA officers, if they observe any criminal activity, will address it at those locations. As far as transportation to these events, that's, everyone has a unique way of getting down there.
Okay. Well, my last question is, how are we going to declare a curfew? Like, what are the expected burdens that must be met before a curfew is declared by our superintendent and deputy mayor? What burdens need to be met in order for it to be clear? What do we need to be seeing before the curfew is declared?
Okay, thank you. You know, I think, again, it goes back, I think every situation is going to be unique. Just because a promoter calls for an event doesn't mean that event will take place. I think that what we do is we work with, again, our outreach workers and everyone to show up at said location where they're calling for it, where they're promoting this event to take place. We will deploy the appropriate resources based upon what we believe through our intelligence gathering, how many individuals might or might not show up, right? It's like any event that we address our resources. We are not going to send 25 teams to something where 15 people are going to show up. So based upon the resources that we have and all the events going on, that's why every day is pretty much unique. But the ability to have the intelligence gathering to see on like May 15th, if a open source has been identified, we'll begin to deploy our resources to that. So does that answer? I mean, is that kind of how, but having the ability to enact that curfew on May 15th is a great, one of the tools, one of the many tools that we could probably use if that event was going to take place. But what we start to see, we're not going to enact a curfew if there's no activity. This is all activity driven. So the deputy chief, the chief, everyone on the scene will start to observe that activity. And if that option to declare a curfew is available, and that is the best option at the time, that is just one of the many aspects that we can apply. So just because they're having a gathering I don't believe that the superintendent or deputy mayor will declare that this curfew go into effect. It'll only be upon the activity that's taking place at the time if this ordinance is needed.
Well,